truly happens when you pause, withdraw your energy from the external world, and begin to focus utterly inward. What shifts when you choose silence and allow the outcomes to speak on your behalf? That journey is not for the superficial. It demands that you confront the emptiness in the absence of surrounding noise and summon the courage to accept that truth sometimes echoes only in silence. But it is precisely in that moment that you uncover a different form of power. The power of one who channels all energy into inner growth, into becoming the most authentic version of oneself. The question is, are you ready to embrace silence, cease explaining, and let your actions and very presence declare it all? Part 1. Why is silence powerful? In a world where people seem endlessly vying to speak out, to prove themselves, to be seen and acknowledged, silence becomes a rare luxury. We have grown accustomed to responding instantly, to saying something that fits the moment, to defending our views lest we appear weak. Yet Jung illuminated a profound paradox. It is precisely when we dare to be silent, when we refuse the compulsion to voice ourselves, that we truly enter the realm of inner power. Silence is not merely the absence of words, it is a state of consciousness. It is the moment when we withdraw energy from external distractions to return inward. In Jung's language, this is the instant when we allow the unconscious, that profound layer often obscured by the clamor of daily life, to begin to speak. When we are caught up in speaking, we hear only the echo of the ego, the social mask, persona we don to adapt. But when we halt, when we fall silent, the shadow rises, the repository of repressed parts, denied emotions, and true power can only emerge when we dare to confront it. Consider a very ordinary situation. You find yourself in an argument with a colleague or loved one. In that tense moment, instinct urges an immediate retort, a need to prove you are right, that you are not being dismissed. But once the argument cools, you realize most of what you said holds no meaning, and may even have worsened the situation. In contrast, if you choose silence, granting yourself a few deep breaths, you gain the clarity to see the bigger picture. Silence is not defeat. It is a form of control over energy, emotions, and the very dynamics at play. This is the power that noise can never attain. Modern psychology confirms this. When entering silence, the prefrontal cortex, the hub of thinking and decision-making, gains space to operate. Freed from limbic interference, we see clearly and choose wisely. Thus, the pause functions as a pause button, restoring the brain's balance and yielding sharper decisions. This clarity is the tangible form of power, not born from shouting, but from the ability to see clearly and choose rightly. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Silence is the path to that process. We cannot heed the unconscious amid noise. Just as to hear the sound of a stream, we must step away from the bustling marketplace. Silence provides the environment for dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious. And from that dialogue, we uncover archetypes, sources of creative energy, clues to our true selves. From another angle, silence is also a form of refusal. When we are silent, we refuse to join the dance of the collective ego. Modern society glorifies display. The more people know about us, the more value we feel. But in truth, the more we display, the more we deplete our inner energy. Silence is the refusal to be drained by the demands of comparison, competition, and proof. It is a declaration. I do not need to explain myself to you to exist. And it is in that refusal that we find freedom. Observe someone building a new habit, exercising, learning a skill, or nurturing a personal project. If they constantly talk about their plans, boasting to everyone about what they will do, they feel a fleeting satisfaction, as if the work is already done. Studies in motivational psychology show that announcing goals releases dopamine in the brain, akin to achieving the goal itself. But this is illusory gratification, diminishing the drive to act. Conversely, the one who chooses silence, focusing solely on daily effort, accumulates power through consistency. This is enduring power, unaccompanied by fanfare, yet yielding unmistakable results. Silence also wields its social power. In conversation, the silent one often holds invisible control, for silence compels others to fill the void, to speculate, to project their own images onto you. Well-timed silence not only renders you enigmatic, but amplifies the weight of your message manifold. Just as in music, the spaces between notes craft the melody. If everything were continuous sound, the piece would dissolve into chaos. It is silence that gives sound its meaning. And in life, silence that lends words their value. Yet the power of silence extends beyond the personal or social. It is the bridge to the spiritual realm, to the mysterious depths of the psyche. Across traditions, from Christianity to Buddhism, Sufism to Zen, silence is revered as the path to ultimate reality. Jung, with his fascination for spiritual symbols and myths, saw that silence is not merely a skill, but a gateway. Crossing that threshold, the individual transcends the petty ego, opening to a vast connection with the collective unconscious, the repository of humanity's ancestral wisdom. Imagine sitting before a still lake. If the surface is rippled by wind or voices, you see only chaotic waves. But when the water lies calm, it becomes a mirror, reflecting the entire sky. The human mind is the same. Only in silence does it turn into a clear mirror, reflecting the truths of the universe. This is why silence is power. It not only allows control over emotions, aids wise action, but also unlocks connection to a profound layer of reality that words can never touch. And perhaps you too have known such a moment, when silence became the mirror, illuminating what you long dared not face. If so, leave a sign in the comments below. An experience, a memory, or simply a concise phrase. Who knows, your silence might awaken someone still seeking themselves. Thus, stillness is never weakness. It is not retreat, but the gathering of energy. Not evasion, but a form of courage, the courage to forego proof, to confront oneself, and to touch truth. In silence, you do not lose power. So before every hasty response, try 3 deliberate breaths and survey the whole. That is the pause button returning choice to your hands. Part 2. Focusing on oneself is not selfishness, but awakening. But that power holds meaning only when directed rightly, inward, toward the personal journey. This is where so many misunderstand. They deem self-focus as selfishness, neglecting others, and placing the ego above all. Yet Jung would tell you, it is not selfishness, but awakening. For only by becoming yourself can you truly be present for others. We are conditioned by a society that exalts sacrifice, where self-forgetfulness is deemed noble. From childhood, we are taught to think of the collective, to put the common good first. It all sounds right. but taken to extremes, it turns us into shadows of ourselves. We give until depleted, strain to please everyone, and one day awaken to find ourselves strangers in our own lives. This is the affliction Jung called the loss of the authentic self, leaving only the social mask, the persona. Focusing on oneself does not mean withdrawing into selfishness, but returning to reconnect with one's own center. Imagine you are an ancient tree. If you do not nourish your roots with soil, water, and light, you cannot offer shade to anyone. A tree cannot say, "I need no soil, I only need to shelter others." The truth is, it must draw sustenance, nurture itself first. And that is not selfishness, it is the law of survival. Humans are no different. If you neglect your inner world, fail to build your own growth, you will soon exhaust yourself and succumb to spiritual burnout, the state now termed burnout. A real-world example. Consider mothers who strain endlessly for their children. They work ceaselessly, sacrifice personal hobbies, and even overlook their own health. Such love is admirable, but do you see how many children grow up insecure? For they sense their mother's fatigue and tension, and their subconscious learns that love means endurance, self-sacrifice. In contrast, a mother who tends to herself maintaining balance imparts a different lesson. Love means living fully with oneself, to radiate peace to others. This is the point Jung emphasized. Self-focus generates radiating power, not selfishness. Modern psychology reinforces this. Studies on self-regulation show that those who prioritize their inner needs exhibit better emotional control, wiser decisions, and healthier relationships. Conversely, those who perpetually ignore themselves to appease others fall prey to anxiety, depression, and feelings of exploitation. They believe they live altruistically, but in truth, they dwell in the bondage of fear, fear of rejection, unloved, unaccepted. Jung called this the dominance of the shadow. When you continually suppress your needs, that rejected part does not vanish. It burrows into the unconscious, growing stronger until it erupts as anger, envy, exhaustion, or even illness. Thus, self-focus is not merely a wise choice, but a responsibility. It is how you dissolve the shadow before it engulfs you. Jung always stressed, you cannot give the world what you yourself lack. If you hold no peace, you sow tension. If you bear no self-love, you offer only bitter sacrifice. Self-focus also means daring to gaze at your most authentic parts, both light and dark. It is the courage to face what you typically evade: smallness, latent selfishness, weakness you dare not admit. In focusing, you neither idealize nor judge yourself. You look squarely, and in that direct gaze you grow. This is not selfishness, but awakening, a state where illusions no longer blind you, where you assume full responsibility for your life. Think of those who, amid crisis, choose to turn inward. Many emerge from loss, illness, or shock more insightful, profound, and empowered. Why? Because crisis forces them to cease chasing others, to focus on themselves for survival. And that focus opens the door to awakening. They no longer live for recognition, but for truth. Jung termed this the onset of individuation, the journey to becoming one's true self, no longer dissolved in collective expectations. Do you know Oprah Winfrey? She endured a childhood scarred by abuse, rejection, and poverty. But rather than let that shadow consume her, Oprah turned inward, confronting pain, learning to heed her inner voice and heal. That journey transformed her into one of the world's most inspiring icons. Oprah once said, "Turn your wounds into wisdom." This is vivid proof of self-focus's power after a crisis. And it is not only the great figures who tread this path. It might be an ordinary man who lost his job after years of company loyalty. Initially, the shock plunged him into confusion and disorientation. But instead of wallowing in resentment, he chose time for reflection. Learning a new skill, exercising regularly, journaling daily to grasp his emotions. A year later, he not only secured a better job, but also emerged more confident, resilient, and intentional in living. Self-focus is both revolutionary and healing. Revolutionary, as it shatters old patterns, living for others' gazes, for approval, for praise. Healing, as it grants the chance to mend bonds with your own soul. When you invest energy in yourself, you begin to sense small joys more keenly, rediscover forgotten creativity, and claim the peace you long thought undeserved. And from that moment, you can step outward and be fully present with others. You no longer give love from fear of loss, but from abundance. You no longer help for recognition, but because it flows naturally from a whole soul. This is the fundamental difference between selfishness and awakening. Selfishness stems from scarcity, awakening from abundance. And only through self-focus can you journey from scarcity to abundance. And perhaps this is the moment you grant yourself a pause. Try sitting still, drawing a deep breath and asking, which true part of you are you living from, and how much remains mere performance for others? Are you giving from wholeness or from depletion? Do not rush to answer. Simply sit with the question, for sometimes silence alone unlocks answers that 1,000 words cannot yield. As Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Life's greatest privilege is not being loved by many, but becoming oneself. Every path to truth, to love, to peace begins there. Part 3. Why do things start to fall into place when you are silent and focused? And then, as you gradually live in alignment with that true self, a strange phenomenon begins to unfold. The external world seems to mirror the changes within you. What once appeared coincidental becomes meaningful. Knots untie themselves, and you realize that everything starts to fall into place because you have shifted your own energy field. Carl Jung had a famous concept, synchronicity, the phenomenon of meaningful coincidence. He believed that when a person enters deep harmony with their inner world, the outer world begins to rearrange itself to reflect that change. You might call it a coincidence, but for Jung, it is the resonance between the inner and outer realms. Just as when you tune an instrument, all the other notes in the orchestra naturally find harmony. When you are silent and focused, you are tuning yourself. And from there, life begins to become an ordered symphony. Recall a time in your life when your mind was in turmoil, when you were pulled into countless distractions, arguments, and anxieties. At that moment, everything around you also became chaotic. Relationships strained, work faltered, friends drifted away. Conversely, there are times when you are focused, clear, and consistent in action, and you find life opening doors. You encounter the right people, the right opportunities, at the right moments. This is not mere chance. Psychology calls it the reticular activating system, RAS, a filtering mechanism of the brain. When you focus on something, the RAS automatically brings related opportunities, information and connections into your field of vision. In other words, when you change within, the world outside changes accordingly, because your brain has been reprogrammed to perceive the new order. Jung went beyond neuroscience. He believed that our personal unconscious is connected to a collective unconscious, a shared energy field of humanity. And when we live in alignment with our inner essence, we resonate with this field, causing what suits us to naturally appear. This is why those who live authentically often have strong intuition, encountering strange serendipities that others cannot explain. But in truth, it is the reflection from the inner world onto the outer. Imagine a mirror. When it is covered in dust, the image you see is distorted and blurry. But when you wipe away the dust, the reflection becomes clear. Life is the same. When you are dominated by noise and distraction, what you attract is chaos. But when you are silent, focused, you are wiping clean the inner mirror. And immediately the reflected world becomes clear, luminous. Things fall into place, not because the world suddenly changes, but because you have changed your perspective, your way of interacting with it. A familiar example. Have you ever noticed that when you decide to buy a certain car, suddenly you see that model everywhere? This is not because suddenly more people are buying the same car as you, but because your mind has been tuned to notice it. Life operates the same way. When you focus on personal growth, you begin to see opportunities, relationships, and paths that serve that journey. What you focus on expands. This is a fundamental principle of both psychology and Jungian philosophy. The key here is life begins to align not through some mystical arrangement from outside, but as the natural consequence of a soul that has found inner order, like a small boat in the ocean. When the rudder is loose, the boat is easily swept aimlessly by waves. But when you grip the rudder firmly, though the sea remains vast, the boat begins to head in the right direction. Silence and focus are precisely that, gripping the rudder of your life. And from there, external storms no longer rock you as before. One of the clearest real-world examples is in those who have experienced disorientation and then chosen to live fully with themselves. Some leave stable jobs to pursue artistic passions. Others end long but toxic relationships to reclaim freedom. Still others quietly step away from the crowd, devoting time to learning and personal development. At first, they all face doubt, loneliness, and judgmental gazes from outside. But then one day, you see that they begin to meet the right supporters, find fitting work, and harvest successes they once could not imagine. This is not good luck. It is the result of placing themselves in harmony with their true path. However, there is an important truth. You cannot pretend to emit the energy you want while inside you are chaotic and misaligned with it. Many try to positivize themselves by repeating affirmations, forcing smiles, or crafting a perfect image on social media. They think that faking it until you make it is enough. But the universe is not fooled by the mask. Others may be impressed by the exterior, but the collective unconscious, the energy field Jung always spoke of, senses directly from your true frequency. This is why so many talk about success but never attract it. They share about love but continue encountering wounding relationships, because their true energy still holds doubt, fear, and inner division. And this dissonance creates noise that causes life to reflect the chaos. Jung once emphasized, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. If the shadow has not been acknowledged, It will always seep into every energy you emit. Thus, the prerequisite for things truly falling into place is that you must be honest with yourself, not pretending peace, but truly embarking on the healing journey, not denying the shadow, but daring to confront and integrate it. When within you becomes unified, between consciousness and unconscious, light and shadow, the energy you emit will naturally be potent and clear. Remember, the universe is never chaotic, only our minds are. And when we are silent, when we focus, the inner chaos dissolves. The outer world immediately becomes a mirror reflecting that clarity. This is why calm, focused, quiet people often give the impression that they attract everything. They do not need to compete, do not need noise, yet doors seem to open for them, because they have opened the door within themselves. So, when you feel everything is disordered, when life seems against you, it may not be the off-kilter world, but you who have strayed from your center. The solution is not to run seeking more answers outside, but to stop, be silent, and focus. And then you will see, without forcing, without controlling, everything will naturally find its right place. Part 4. Silence and focus are the gateway to depth. But something deeper is this. Silence and focus do not merely help you regain external balance, they open a far vaster inner journey. For when order is re-established on the surface, the door to depth begins to crack open, where you can confront the most mysterious layers of the soul, where light and shadow coexist, the space Jung called the realm of individuation. Depth in Jung's philosophy is not some abstract, distant concept. It exists within us, right here, right now. But ordinarily, we are drowned in the surface. Noisy news, meaningless comparisons, words that demand response, roles we must strain to uphold. Then, the mind is like a lake, constantly stirred by the wind. Beneath, there are countless creatures, currents and secrets, but we never see them. Only when the water stills, when silence is established, do we glimpse that depth. This is why silence and focus are the gateway, because they restore to the mind the ability to peer to the very bottom. To truly step through this gateway, you need to create small silences for yourself in everyday life. It could be turning off all screens and sitting in quiet for a few minutes after a long day, letting the mind not be led astray by notifications and news. It could be the habit of breathing deeply in and out before reacting to criticism, as if wiping dust from the inner mirror. It could be writing a few lines in a journal at nightfall, not to judge yourself, but to allow suppressed voices the chance to appear on the page. These practices may seem small at first glance, but they are the keys that gradually unlock the door to the deeper lands of the soul. Imagine descending into a deep cave in the earth. When still holding a blazing torch, the firelight casts jagged shadows on the walls, distorting everything so you see only chaos. But when you lower the torch, allowing your eyes to adjust to the darkness, you begin to discern the true forms. Intricate cracks in the stone, glistening veins of ore, even ancient carvings hidden in the walls. The soul is the same. When shrouded in noise and the glaring light of social roles, we live only with the surface mask, the persona. But in silence, when no clamor obscures, we see the forgotten parts, primal fears, secret longings, wounds never healed. And this is what makes many fear silence, because they know it will force them to face the voices long imprisoned in the shadows. In reality, Perhaps you have experienced this moment. A sleepless night, no phone, no one to talk to, just you with yourself. Suddenly, old memories surface, unanswered questions arise. Why this path? Why still carry regret? Those emotions drive many to fill the void with music, movies, meaningless chatter, anything but silence. But Jung would say, it is precisely at that threshold that you touch depth. And if you dare to pass through, you enter the land where true transformation occurs. Psychology also reveals the power of silence. In studies on the default mode network, the brain's default network, scientists have found that when we cease external activity, when we quiet, this region reconnects, processing memories, emotions, and forging a deeper self-view. This is the neural mechanism for what Jung long described. In stillness, the unconscious has the chance to speak, linking with consciousness to restructure the whole person. It is a process of healing and creation that no external sound can provide. The important thing is, you cannot pretend to enter depth. You cannot act silent while inside is turmoil, feign focus while the mind races. The universe senses this discord. Others may be deceived by the image you construct, but your energy will speak for you. If you have not truly confronted the shadow will still leak through every word, every action, keeping your life in chaos. But if you dare to be honest with the emptiness, dare to sit in silence and let the buried voices be uttered, you will begin to feel a new unity. And when within you becomes unified, depth unfolds. Many spiritual traditions have known this for thousands of years. Zen masters sit for hours in zazen, not to flee the world, but to pass through it into depth. Hermits withdraw from crowds, not to deny life, but to find truth within it. In Christianity, the image of desert hermits and ascetics, like Saint Anthony the Great, father of the hermits, carries the same spirit. They leave noisy cities for desolate places, not to evade humanity, but to confront themselves and God in absolute silence. The desert becomes a symbol of inner shadow, where all noise dissolves and man has nothing to cling to but faith and truth. The Jungian archetype of the hermit is this image, a figure withdrawn, holding a lantern, illuminating the path in darkness. It is the lantern of consciousness, and the darkness is the unconscious. When we are silent, we become our own hermit, daring to enter the dark to find light. And this is the wonder. Once you step into depth, you are no longer swayed by surface things. Petty comparisons, criticisms, and vain desires lose their weight. Instead, you feel solidly grounded. You are no longer a leaf blown by the wind, but the root of your own life tree. From here, what you do, what you say, carries new weight, the weight of one who has touched depth. Thus, silence and focus are not merely life skills. They are the gateway leading you out of the turbulent surface into the land where transformation occurs. The gateway opens to meet your own shadow and reconcile with it. The gateway to inner unity, where every scattered piece is assembled into a whole self. This is why Jung once said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. One who only looks outward forever chases vague dreams. One who dares to turn inward, silent, focused, awakens. And that awakening not only changes how you see life, but changes life itself. As you reach the end of this journey, what lingers is not the applause of the masses, but the steady rhythm of an inner world that has found its footing. Transformation needs no fireworks. It grows quietly like roots sinking deep into soil, a little each day, unshowy but enduring. From the moment you accept slowing down to listen, life begins to change its grammar. Words soften, choices unhurry, and presence deepens. Others see it before you can even explain. A new day can thus begin differently. Instead of rushing affirmations, you allow yourself minutes of quiet to align your state. Instead of hasty retorts, you breathe deeply and recognize the rising emotion. Instead of chasing flattering labels, you let actions do the introducing. That softening is not a compromise. It is the dignity of one who has found a center to return to after every great wind. Of course, the path promises no ease, but that unease becomes worthy tuition for the solidity. You know where you stand and why. From that foundation, connections self-purify, work clarifies, and time ceases wasting on performances. You no longer need to stage an image. You simply live in your true rhythm. When your rhythm harmonizes, results know how to speak. If these lines touch you, leave yourself a small marker. Save this piece as a gentle reminder each time the world pulls you outward. And if you wish to journey with content that goes straight to depth rather than noisy surface, hit like and subscribe as a quiet pact with yourself. Each time distracted, I will turn inward before stepping forward. Not to count numbers, but to build an anchor when needed to recall the way.